Hey guys, welcome to Quinian's Budget Crafts. So over on the Dungeoneers Discord, Zero posted a challenge here. I really like these challenges because they make me build something that I otherwise probably wouldn't. One thing though is that the core rule, or the core of the build must be 1/24th or 1/25th scale plastic model kit. So like the typical cars and stuff you can buy on Amazon or Hobby Lobby, whatever. The thing is though, I'm not going to pay these kind of prices for something that's really just a display that I had no intention of building in the first place. So if my method disqualifies me, that's cool, Zero, let me know, it's totally fine, I had fun building it anyway. So let's go ahead and build this thing. Because I did not want to buy the model kit, I ended up 3D printing stuff. The truck I did myself, the bike and the characters, those are on Thingiverse, I'll post the links down below. And even though I didn't do a model car kit, I did want to keep it in the spirit of the build where you have a bunch of little pieces. So when I did the truck here, I had left off pretty much all of the details. It's just the basic shape. But being that this was a 3D print that I kind of intended to be a little bit messed up, I didn't take a lot of care in it. I'm going to go ahead and sand the parts to make them fit properly and glue them up. I'm going to use the super glue and baking soda method to make the really rough rusted out weld lines. If you didn't want those to be rough, you could actually just use the same method and then go sand it down. And this truck also does have 3 little holes on the rear fenders there. I didn't model those in, so I'll just go ahead and mark those and drill them out. Same thing for the headlights. And for that detail that runs down the side of it, I went ahead and marked it roughly with a Sharpie where it's going to go. And I'm going to use some of this leather lace. I think I've used this before in other builds. You just glue it down and then you can paint it really any color you want. It's got a really nice rounded profile on one side and then the other side's flat. There you go, it looks close enough to the original artwork there. And also I should point out that this is based off of the Final Fantasy VII original from the 90s. In the remake, they remodeled this truck a little bit. Like, it still looks like the original, but they did remodel it and they did a really good job. That remake graphic is amazing. For the bars on the back window, just glue a couple of toothpicks on there, and then I use some of the supports from printing as little bars. Just trim them to size and glue them down. For the door hinges, I use these little like gold brick looking things out of that stuff I mentioned before, like the Bejewel Your Face gems. It's got a whole bunch of different little shapes in there that are great for this kind of stuff. And I used a teardrop shaped one of those for the door handle. And then a slightly larger one for the side turn signal lights. And just glue it all down with super glue. I'm being kind of fast and loose here with the way I'm putting stuff on because I intend to add other things to it later. So some of this may get removed or covered up. For the headlights, I'm going to use these clear silverback gems. They're going to sit in place for the headlights, but don't glue them in yet because I do want them to be, shiny silver clear. And I'm going to spray paint this whole thing gray. So don't put your headlights in just yet, unless you want to paint them white. I made the wall between the floor of the bed and the bottom of the bed too thin, so it printed out with a bunch of holes in it. Plus I was really rough with how I removed the support, so I probably just tore some chunks out anyway. But you can just put some like painter's tape down and use the super glue and baking soda method to build a little flat spot in there. And of course, if you're going for an apocalyptic build, the more damage and rust, the better. You could have actually left the holes in the bed if you want to. Alright, so now it's time to go ahead and spray paint everything with a gray primer. Also, after painting, I realized that I had totally forgotten to put the hood scoop thing and the little border under the front windshield there on, and I panicked and I did it off camera. Whoops. But I mean, you know how to do that. You just make the shape out of XPS, and then the one in front was just a strip of foam with a few of the little dot things from the little jewels. So for painting, I struggled a lot with this patina paint, trying to get it on, enough to where it would actually cover everything. Maybe I should have did a different color base or something. I don't know. I mean, this paint's probably not really supposed to actually cover because it is a patina, but it is the color that they used in the game, so I tried it. It ended up taking a whole bunch of coats and still didn't come out all the way. That's actually fine. But then I went through with some gloss black and did up all of the tires. And then I go back through with silver and do up the exhaust and the inner circle of the tires and anything needs to be silver, really. The bars in the back of the thing, the door handles, that kind of stuff. And this truck actually has a whole bunch of gold accents, so I did that as best I could. I didn't really model that in mind, so there wasn't really anywhere to put it around the windows, but it's alright. Now we can super glue in the tires, and the little rear fender, and the exhaust pipes. Paint the taillights there red. And I put down a bunch of silver paint in the bed. I don't know if the bed is actually silver in the game or not, but sure, why not? And I've got one of these splatter screens here on recommendation from Miller. It works pretty good. You just cut out around the frame and use whatever bits you need. I mostly just use that for the windows. I just cut out a piece that's the right size and then hold it down with a little stick and super glue and baking soda around it on the inside just to hold it in. For painting the figures themselves, I absolutely hate painting, and it's really difficult for me to film, so I ended up painting most of these on the live stream that I did with the Beard and the Professor, so you can go check the recap of that. But they need to be glued down to something that will hold them up into the right position in the truck. So I just cut a little XPS block to set their chairs on, and I glued that to a piece of dollar store foam, painted everything black, and then when I went to stick them into the truck, I realized that the little dollar store block of foam was just a little bit too much sticking out the bottom. So I took this clear plastic container, cut a little chunk of it, not because I need clear plastic, but because it's really thin and really stiff. Then I could glue my XPS block to that and stick that in the truck, and then just hot glue it around the outside there to hold it in place without it sticking out the bottom. There you go. Now they're sitting in there at the right height. And we can go ahead and glue in Red 13 and Barrett. Red 13 is actually in the wrong pose and looks a little bit large here compared to the game, but I actually really like it. That's probably one of the better models in that pack. It is really well done. And with Cloud on his bike here, I just pretty much painted the whole thing black, gave him the original game's version of clothing where he's wearing blue, and did a couple silver accents here and there. That is the bike from Advent Children, if you were wondering. Couldn't find the one from 7, but that's fine. So I also picked up some of these Starlink guns to use as guns to go on the build. They're a little bit too big, even at this giant scale, but they still look pretty cool, and a lot of the stuff in Final Fantasy World is ridiculously oversized, so that actually kind of fits. Then I looked through my box of various guns and wheels and whatnot, the little Gasland part box, trying to find something that would actually fit with the theme. I'm still, like it's supposed to be like Apocalypse, like Gaslands, but I still want it to fit the Final Fantasy 7, so thinking about what kind of parts these guys would have probably salvaged from Shinra or something. They're going to be like machine guns mostly, so that's what I went for. I ended up putting 2 of these little, I think they're 3-barrel. They'd be like a gun emplacement at Gasland scale, which is 1/64. But on this, they work pretty good as like a single barrel kind of machine gun thing to mount to a bike. And then for the truck, I went with the 2 multi-barrel Gatling guns that have the little belt, the ammo belt. And of course the big giant Starlink guns. I also decided to use a spiked roller on the front of the bike because I thought it was cool. Just going to spray paint everything with gray primer and some silver. And then I just dunked them in the wash because I don't care how much is on there. Because this silver spray paint, it like seals it or something. It kind of repels washes and paints and stuff. So not that much is actually going to stick to them. For the roller on Cloud's bike, the piece that comes with there doesn't really fit in a way that I can mount it to the bike because it's not meant for this size of a model. So I ended up making a little thing to give it like an articulating kind of thing. It's just a round bead with a toothpick through it. And then a couple of popsicle sticks on the other side with the holes in them for the toothpick to go through. And then I cut them nice and rounded and stuff with the little grinder there. Go ahead and glue everything in place and then snip off the excess bit of toothpick. And I'm going to use some more of these little gold dots as like rivet heads. Just super glue all that on. And we can do the same spray paint method to it, the gray primer and the silver. To make these guns a little bit more interesting, I went through with the gold marker and did all of the ammo in gold. I know it's brass, but you know what I'm saying. And then I did the actual links that hold the rounds together in black. And I also painted the banding that wraps around the barrels in black. I know that's backwards. Usually the barrels are black and the bandings and accents are silver, but that would make the overall thing very dark. So in order to make it actually show up, I did the colors reversed. Most people probably aren't going to notice that. And once you're all done with all that, you can go ahead and glue it in place. Same thing for the bike. Once it's all painted up however you like, you got wash on it stuff, you can just glue that in place. Ended up putting the guns on the front portion here. And then the roller, I just glued to the front part there, the forks that are holding the front tire. I didn't make any little rivet heads for that. I probably should have, but that's okay. So I really didn't like the front end of this car. I think it's kind of goofy. I don't like the hood scoop. I don't like the gold bordering or whatever that is. So I decided I'd try and cover it up a little bit in the most natural way possible. And printed out the Loveless poster and a Shinra sign. You can find those on Google. I can't really cite a source for that because there's like 15,000 results if you look it up. Took some more of the clear plastic thing there. Took the corner of it because it's got a really nice bend to it. Figured out what size would fit for like essentially a snowplow. Then I took a little piece of a square dowel and cut that, and then I put a coffee stir stick on the back end of that to make like a little mount to put it on the truck. You probably won't see it, but it still needs some way to mount securely, so you do have to build some kind of mount. It is just a very simple T of wooden bits. I temporarily glued it to the front of the truck with like a little bitty dot of super glue, and then put a couple of coffee stir sticks under the front of it to hold it up off the ground so that I could get a good spot to mount it onto the plow blade here. Same method I use on pretty much everything when I'm just trying to hammer something out. Super glue and baking soda. And then I painted the wood in black and Mod Podge because I was actually trying to make the stir stick warp on purpose. Use the little rotary tool with a sanding drum on it to rough up all of the plastic because it's super smooth, and when it's that smooth your paint is not going to stick to it even if you're using like a super sticky spray paint. So go ahead and rough that up however you want. You could just use regular sandpaper or a file. And then I used more of that leather lace and some more of the little gold round thingies to make rivet heads. And I put a coffee stir stick on the very bottom of it to make that front raised edge. I think most plows, at least where I am, they have like an actual sharp blade on the bottom. And then we can use the same painting method on that. Just hot glue it to a stick so you don't spray your hand, and hose it down in gray and silver. You don't really need to wait for one to dry between the other. You just need to let the silver dry for about 10 minutes. Then we can go through and coat the whole thing in glue, and then stick the Loveless poster on there. Ended up cutting it kind of strange on purpose to make it look like it was, just like a reused piece of metal or something. And then cut around the border to trim out the excess. And then I started adding on a little bit of watered down metallic copper just to try to rust it out a bit, especially where there were spots where the poster was actually missing from the thing. And go ahead and glue it to the truck. Because there actually wasn't really any room to glue it on because the little accent strips on the front, there's a tiny little tab it was hanging on by. I went through along the bottom with the hot glue and then filled in the gap so it just sort of matches right there. Got super impatient and started putting water on the hot glue to make it cool faster, and then went over it again with super glue and baking soda to get the rusty weld effect instead of the hot glue. Paint has a really hard time sticking to hot glue. Still didn't like the front of the truck. I really don't like that hood scoop, so I got one of these metal coffee can lids and smeared some glue on it and stuck the Shinra sign to that, and then you just trim it out with some scissors. And now you have essentially a metal sign, actually. I mean, you can bend it because it's metal. It'll hold whatever shape you bend it into. So just bent it to fit around the front there like they were trying to armor the truck. Put a couple of little rivet things on there to make it look like it was actually attached somehow. Anywhere it was in the way of the windshield, I went ahead and just sort of bent that over. And then I took some of the dollar store's business card holder mesh. You've seen me use that before. Just cut that with some scissors to make like a chain link fence sort of thing to go around the bed of the truck. Glued some matchsticks to it to try and give it some kind of support because there's really nothing to glue here. It's just like a really thin mesh. Paint those up silver and then glue them to the edges of your mesh there. and then you'll have a contact point to actually glue it to the truck. And with all the parts on, now it's time to rust it out. Pretty similar to what I did on the Remorez, the sandworm. It's just brown, red, copper, couple others, pretty much anything in the red to brown spectrum all mixed together and splashed on haphazardly. Anywhere it's too thick, you go back in with a wet paintbrush and just sort of wipe it away and let it run down. And then I covered the entire truck in like a tan colored wash just to try to get rid of some of the new paint look. It still wasn't dirty enough for me though, so I put some grout powder in a sifter and shook that onto it. Went through and dusted off where I didn't want it or like it was too much. Hose it down with some hairspray. And wipe it away anywhere it's too much. You know, you get like a muddy effect because it's mixing it around. Let that dry completely and then we'll do the spinny thing. So there you go, Final Fantasy VII Gaslands Mashup. How about we make some character cards for these things? So for the truck, I know that the game original wiki or whatever calls it a motorcycle, or like it's a three-wheeled thing, so a trike or whatever. For the sake of Gaslands, we're just going to go ahead and call this thing a heavy truck, which is heavyweight, giving you a whole of 14. We're going to go 2 miniguns on the forward mounts, 2 heavy machine guns on the rear mounts, a ram up front, max gear of 3, handling 2, crew of 4 at a cost of 45 cans. For the bike, we're going to go with the bike at lightweight with only 4 hull points, but you get full throttle and you get pivot. You only have 1 build slot, so we're going to say that the 2 machine guns on the front are a single machine gun, and then you can get some other stuff without any build slots. Like you can have an exploding ram with no build slot, and you can have a nitro booster with no build slots, because Cloud was faster than everybody else on the road, so why not give him nitros? It's going to be a max gear of 6, handling 5, crew of 1, obviously, for a total cost of 14. There you go, guys. That was pretty fun to build. I might actually do these in Gasland scale. Of course, as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.